today. I am super excited to welcome in Lopes Insider Paul Coro and my old friend from the dark days of our Suns coverage. Paul, how you doing out there at GCU?
Living my best life. What a gig to be part of everything that's happened here over the last 8 years, to come in right as the athletic programs were turning D1 eligible and be part of the growth to championships across the board and a brighter future, moving conferences ahead. And it's not just men's basketball. It's obviously the flagship of the athletic department, but this is an athletic department that wins like WAC Commissioner Cups every year because of how balanced across and how great the baseball, softball, track, women's basketball, volleyball, all those programs are.
I call it the Coro bump. I mean, the men's basketball team, you show up, they win 4 or 5 WAC titles. The women's team making their first tournament appearance. I think this is all because Paul Coro showed up on campus and showed those kids what it's like to be professionals.
I think I'm just the blessed one in this scenario. I mean, I think that's the Bryce Drew effect more than anything on men's basketball, because he's the one that came in 5 years ago and took it to a dance right away, and 4 of 5 and getting that first round win last year against the top 25 St. Mary's, and then taking Alabama to the wire in the second round. It's what, ramped up the expectations to where this team was just waiting for March this year, and now they get that chance.
Yeah, they made a heck of a run in the WAC tournament. They were the number 2 seed. They beat Utah Valley. What are you looking at coming out of that tournament that stood out to you about this team and going into the matchup on Friday?
Utah Valley was like a really balanced team. They didn't have a lot of holes in them. The Lopes saw them really early in conference play and got beat on the road and kind of found out what they were all about. Handled them pretty handily in this arena, as they do just about everybody. They have the home record is second only to Houston over the last 2 years in the nation, with 1 loss. And so that showed them, that they were where they were in the conference. I think they knew that all along. They were an overwhelming preseason pick, but this team was so predicated on March and had nothing go wrong last year. No injuries. Everything was like a Cinderella story. They big winning streaks. Ty Grant Foster comes from this guy who was out of college basketball because of heart surgery to a guy who's the WAC Player of the Year. So this one, once it came to WAC tournament week, they were so locked in. Bryce Drew didn't recognize them in practice because they were just a different team, and they played their best basketball to get 3 wins and 4 nights in Vegas.
Well, you look at it, and I think some people are going to get kind of their introduction to the GCU program on Friday when they play up in Seattle against Maryland. What players should fans be looking out for in that first round matchup? And what do you think, how do they kind of stack up against Maryland here?
Yeah, this is a tough draw. I mean, I think Maryland's probably looking at it like they probably feel like they deserve a higher seed. And they got sent across the country to Seattle. They have the highest scoring starting 5 in the nation. They got a lottery pick in Derek Queen. That's a big man, and another big man right next to him, a great point guard in Jacoby Gillespie that transferred in from Belmont, and he shoots over 40% on 3-pointers. So, the matchups are going to be really interesting. Duke Brennan's really developed into a solid big man. He's a top 20 rebounder in the nation, so he will get that big charge up front, and he's up to it, I think, because he's developed so much over his 2 years at GCU into a double-double machine. He's got 10 of them this year. And then to handle the other big, Jacoby Coles, transferred in from TCU. He's the only new starter on this Lopes team, and he had averaged double digits at TCU, but he's having a career season. He's across the board, career-high averages in just about everything. And then he had back-to-back 20-point games in the tournament, and that was the first time in his career he's done that. So just lots of things peaking, and, of course, this team's predicated on defense. So a guy like Colin Moore, Ray Harrison in the backcourt, and Ty Grant Foster on the wing, those are the guys that can give the Terrapins trouble too. Their only weakness is bench.
Well, you brought up Bryce Drew at the beginning. How important has he been to this program and defining who they are and the type of play that we're going to see on Friday?
Yeah, Bryce Drew just came in with incredibly organized, detailed, year-round drive. He's a big-time recruiter. I mean, people forget that he recruited Darius Garland to Vanderbilt. He just never got to play there because of injury, and he's turned out pretty good. And so he's had that type of players. He's brought in, right away. He brought in Asbjorn Midtgaard, who was the national field goal percentage leader on that first WAC team, and it's just built from there, the talent level. And for a guy that's known, for in the NBA and the Valpo shot, that was this time of year, he's incredibly geared for defense. The one consistent thing about these 5 seasons of GCU teams is that they rank among the nation's best in defense, and that was sort of the hiccup early on until mid-December, and everything flipped since then to the point where they're top 3 in the nation in defensive rating since mid-December.
Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the women's team as well. The best record in the country, 32-2, 30-game win streak. Molly Miller is one of the most talked about women's coaches in the game right now. They also are the 13th seed. They're heading to Waco to face Baylor. Obviously, a very tough matchup for them. How has the season been for Molly Miller and her group, and how impressed have you been with them?
Yeah, this is their breakthrough season. They get their first WAC tournament championship, first D1 tournament trip, and it's because she has a roster where the entire rotation is geared up for this season because it's their last. There's no doubt about having players locked in when they're going through their last season like they are, and they're deep. And Trinity Santonio became a player of the year. Tiara Brown, she was Molly Miller's first recruit. She was defensive player of the year. Alyssa Durazo Frescas is the best 3-point shooter in the nation. If you go by anything, percentage, makes per game, she broke Becky Hammond's WAC record. Like, that's from 98 and a pretty decent name. She did it in Vegas, no less. So that was a pretty good fitting thing, but they just don't have holes. And they'll be tough and then midseason, if anything, they needed some post help, and they added a player who had been out 2 years off of 2 knee surgeries, and she was a former Big West Defensive Player of the Year, Kristina Yeskiova. And so it just, like, how does a team that hot get better? And then they add a player that shores up maybe one little sliver of weakness. Now, Baylor is an incredible task. That's they're big, and it's going to be probably a battle of wills on that one. Styles, the Lopes do a lot of ball pressure. They like to get up, down, get off shots, play quick, but they just don't know how to lose anymore. The last team they lost to was Oregon in November.
Have you been around a coach that kind of brings the energy, infectious energy, like Coach Miller? Because it seems like her players are so bought in to her. The fans seem to feed off of her as well. How much fun has it been to be around that as well this season?
Yeah, what you see at the WAC tournament on camera and celebrations is how she is in the middle of June in a summer workout. It's just, she's always high energy. She's, when she first got here, she was out there in the drills because she was trying to impart her system about defensive intensity. They're showing it. She's a former point guard, so she's got that grit that she talks about all the time. And, they started with that. Defensive pressure was the calling card of the program, and they got there quickly on a national basis for forcing turnovers. But then the entire weaponry has been enhanced to be a better offensive team, to add 3-point shooters, to have more nuances.
All right. I know you're not in the prediction game, but how well set up are both of these teams to potentially pull the 13-4 upset on Friday in this weekend?
I won't deny either one of them a shot. I mean, obviously, I think if you look around the nation, there's not a lot of people picking Grand Canyon on either side. I think last year there was a little bit more intrigue about the Grand Canyon St. Mary's matchup. Like, ooh, that might be trouble for St. Mary's. And you hear some people say that as well with Maryland, especially if you can get into their bench because they're so top heavy. But that top heavy scores 79 a game, so that's hard to overcome alone. But defense wins championships, and defense carries over this time of year when games are called differently. So and both of those programs are predicated on that. So they got a fighter's chance.
Okay, I got to ask. Are you renting a Mustang while you're up in Seattle? Inside joke.
That was classic. Maybe not so modern now to have a car that lights the Mustang on the ground, but back in our day, we were mind blown at seeing it.
I mean, it's crazy that was a decade ago already. Paul, I really appreciate your time. It was great catching up with you, and we'll talk soon. Enjoy the tournament.